Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kivi Bros Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal. My name is Tyler Kivi and I'm your host. Today's guest is someone that was supposed to be stepping away from work, but he's back and we're thankful that he's back. Curt Anderson, welcome.
Thank you, and appreciate you reaching out to me.
Well, I'm excited to have you on here because majority of how we grew as a company came from the work that you did. And there's so many things that you did that nobody knows, right? Like a salesman behind the scenes is always grinding. You're always, whether you're hustling to get work, you're hustling to cover the work you got. There's always kind of like it's a teeter-totter, right? 1 minute you have too much work, 1 minute you never have enough.
Right.
But before we get into the sales aspect, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind?
Okay, well, I'm the old guy in the whole operation by far. Coming back again, actually back starting this week. But I started working in the trucking industry. It was 1973. I was working for a local tank truck carrier.
So what was it? When was deregulation? Do you remember what year that was?
That would have been in the Reagan years, I think. Wasn't that within the 80s?
So you started right before all that.
Yeah. The company I worked with was actually a union, carrier, tank truck carrier, and they all were at that time. Yeah. And so I started out washing trucks on the weekend, so we were considered the weekend warriors. And then you just kind of moved up through. Yeah. So every Saturday and Sunday, we washed all the trucks, and they had 65, I believe. And
so was that right out of high school? You went right into that?
I was in high school.
You were in high school?
Just in between 9th and 10th grade when I started that.
So you've been in trucking literally before you even graduated.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. I don't know what it was. I just loved to see the trucks. And my dad was a good friend with the terminal manager. I had a good friend of mine that started working there, and he really liked it. So once I got on duty with them and was a weekend warrior, then I wanted to do everything.
Well, and that's where you learn a lot about the industry and the company just itself. Being there, the washing the trucks is a good way to familiarize yourself with the equipment.
Exactly.
Moving into sales, I guess it's very helpful to know what the equipment is and how it works.
Well, it was just like with you and your family, you came up through doing everything, So when I had got the chance to move into a fueler, I was doing that in high school. So I would get out of school and work afternoons and fuel trucks for, from 4 to midnight.
So right in the yard?
Yeah.
So you just made sure they came to work and had full fuel tanks?
The drivers they didn't have to do, a pre-trip really, because they had the old tach charts. And when they punched the clock, they could jump in the truck. Back in the day, they had to stop every 2 hours for tire checks and stuff. But the oil was ready. Everything had to be ready for those guys. And that's one of the things that we did.
And so that was right in Duluth?
Right in Esco, right where I lived.
And so how was that in the winter?
That was really fun. It was, I'll tell you what, we had, on the weekends, it was 35 below, and those old trucks, we didn't shut them off.
I was going to say, did they just run all night?
When it was that cold, we did. But I've been many times they had the old Internationals with the 400 Cummins in them, and we'd be out there with a blowtorch putting it on the oil pan because it would be just like you pull the dipstick out, it was like glue. Yeah. And so you had to heat that oil up, or you'd cook the engine if you started it that way.
And so their radius was just Iron Range, or like northern Minnesota down to Minneapolis area? Or?
Yeah, back then a full day was a load to International Falls was a full day. Nowadays, you can do an International Falls in Virginia, if you get it done.
Just because the equipment was so much different, no power steering, the driver was tired, if anything, by the time we got back.
Well, their heaters were not good. I mean, the drivers would come in wearing Air Force hats and chopper mitts. Those guys were tough. No power steering,
right?
Hockey puck suspensions.
Not only was it rough riding, there was no heat, and you had to lay on the steering wheel to get it to turn.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, I took a ride with Derek. We hauled a load, we moved a load of logs, and I couldn't believe how nice that was to ride in that truck, how comfortable it was compared to those old beasts. Oh. Those guys are really something that did that every day.
You have an appreciation for what they went through, especially cross country. The drivers that were leaving, wherever they were, going across country day in and day out. They were probably appreciative back then, though. They could work on their equipment. Something started to go sideways, pull out your tool bag and wrench on it, where now it's a little bit different.
Big time, especially if you look at even the highway systems. Mm-hmm. When you got north of Virginia, it wasn't 4-lane, and there's no 4-lane. There were narrow roads, for the guys.
Well, Interstate 35 is not really that old either.
No, they built that. As a matter of fact, when I moved into the office and help out, I was actually dispatching the cement loads that built, for the highways right out here.
Yeah, that'd been interesting to see all that progression. But back to, so then you're fueling the trucks at night.
Yeah.
Keep walking us through.
Well, and so then my buddy he moved into a maintenance guy. So I just kept following. I'd get my work done, and I would follow him around and learn stuff. And then eventually, what I ended up doing when the greaser, was on vacation, mm-hmm. I was able to move in, and so I was changing oil on the trucks and greasing trucks, and anytime I had a chance, I'd be helping mechanics. So I learned all this different things like that, and it was great. That's why you had a little bit of everything going in, and then an office position came open. So, and this was still in high school. I went in and came in, worked midnights.
Yeah.
And so my parents I really had to beg them to do that, and they let me do it. But it was probably about 2 months in, I remember I fell asleep in school.
I was going to say, when did you sleep? Obviously, school.
Yeah, well, Mrs. Bourne didn't have much to do with that, and that was my last midnight shift.
Enough of that. You're focusing on school. So then you graduate, and you're in the office already then?
Yeah, I was in the office and in the full-time dispatch.
Right out the gate, right in it.
Just a little time out of there, and then of course I met Denise, my wife Denise, when we were seniors. So we got married the next year, mm-hmm. and then I was full time there doing that.
So I guess I have to ask, when you were that young, being a dispatcher, do you remember? Maybe you do, you don't. But was it a challenge to get the drivers to work with you because you were so young?
Not really. The biggest thing is that I guess there was so much work. I mean, back in the day, there was a stack of loads to haul for Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like, here's on the most important, and the guys would just kind of take what they wanted.
Yeah. So there was enough work where you were always just helping guide the ship. Yeah. And I remember a little bit, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't, I just think of people that have never been in the trucking industry, and when they come into it, it's always hard per se to earn your stripes because there's so many different angles. And, and if you haven't had the opportunity to wash trucks, wrench on them, fuel them at night, know a little bit of everything that they go through just to keep that truck moving, it's sometimes hard to get that respect. And for me, I had kind of walked that same path, but there were still drivers that were like, okay, where's your dad? Let me talk to him. Or where's your brother? Because you're just getting into this and I want to make sure to make the right decision. But okay.
That's for sure. But it was very interesting. It was fun. It was exciting.
Yeah. And obviously it was all pen and paper.
Yeah. Everything was. Yeah.
You had to keep everything.
That was when I was, especially at night, when you were take care of the payroll was done off the tach charts, and the logs are all obviously all.
Why don't you tell us what a tach chart is? They break that down.
It was for miles per hour. And here's your miles per hour, and they had 2 discs, and they would put that in there right in the dashboard, and they would put the little chart. It's a round disc that was carbon, and there's a needle in there.
Okay.
And as the truck would go down the road, this needle would move up and down, and then the tach would do, so you could see exactly when the driver stopped, because if he's stopping on load, that needle's not moving.
Yeah.
So you'd have whatever that time was, anywhere probably up to an hour where there was just non-movement. Then he takes off, then the tach charts go up and down, so you can actually see, and it went per miles per hour, so you can actually see how fast they were going. And that's one of the first things that back then, the state patrol, if there was an incident, would say, "Let me see your tach charts."
So that's something you had to change every day?
Every day, the driver, and that's what they were paid off of.
Really?
Yeah. And then they would look at it and had, pretty easy to do the math when you started and left. And then when they went off duty, they'd have to mark on the, loading, unloading.
So they were
checks.
Writing above
where they were writing on the tach chart itself.
That's interesting. I guess I never known that was the form or the way that they turned in like their log receipt, like this is what I did today. Here's my tach.
And their log would have to match what their tach chart showed.
So essentially it's kind of now like, for example, a GPS, like it knows where the truck was, what it did. No different than your tach chart, just a little different format, right? Like a little more pen and paper.
Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting.
And, then you had to watch out too, because sometimes those little needles would bend and you didn't get that correct.
So you would actually just take some pliers and straighten it out, or what?
Well, I never messed with that. I was going to touch that. So the mechanics would have to repair them or replace the head, the speedometer head.
So how long were you in operations before you got out there and started, whether it was cold calls or just door to door? When did that start?
Let's see. When I was probably 1983 is when I moved into a different company in Superior and started in the office there as a dispatcher. And I was there for about a year and a half. And then the terminal manager was going to be retiring. He was a good guy. He was ready to retire, so there was not a whole lot of extra effort involved. The way I looked at it, I'd come into work at 11 o'clock, and he'd have a bunch of orders sitting that he had taken, but didn't do anything with them.
So you're saying he retired before he retired?
Pretty much, yeah. So finally one day I went through it. I don't know. Once I got to know him, I said it was probably a few months. And finally one day, instead of coming at 11, I came in at 8:30, and he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to skid here. You've got drivers that could have been out on the road already, and you got a pile of orders sitting here. I might as well get here and do the work." Yeah. Well, then he told me, "Well, don't come in again." Well, then the next day, those orders weren't laying there when I got there. So so I called him out on it.
You had to get him fired back up and get him back on the job.
Right. Well, then you had, as things went along, pricing, you started watching the prices in the hauling gasoline is, the tank truck industry. Well, they really started to watch the pricing, and there was a few customers that were really on that. Well, the shippers changed price at midnight. Mm-hmm. Well, and they'd find out that the price was going to go up around 5 o'clock. Well, then everybody wanted to get their load before midnight.
And get it in the truck before midnight, so they got that lower price.
So if you sit around and don't send a truck guy out, here's a load that could be out. The guy could have been out 2 hours ago. He could have got another load in.
So that's not very different from nowadays, right? Still kind of the same concept. Fuel prices publish at 5 p.m. Eastern or Central. Is it Eastern or Central?
I think it's Central time.
So they publish, and then that dictates how busy you are that night. Or if get it tomorrow, it's a few cents cheaper, or get it today, it's going to be a few cents more expensive.
Yeah, well, especially when it was going up, look out.
Yeah, big jumps. 15 cents on a 8,000-gallon truckload is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, and there was some of the, the companies, the bigger companies at the time that had a lot of storage tanks. So, I'd get a call and, "Hey, here's 10, give me 15 loads. If you can get them before midnight, pull it, but don't."
So kind of hedging the market.
Playing the market.
Market's going up. Let's get 10 loads in this tank. And
so you hauled a bunch of loads, and the next day you didn't have nothing to do, Just
wait, then distribute that as time goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you dealt with a lot of different operations.
Road jobs. We started with the paving, there was a lot of different cement work, cement jobs. We were hauling into the portable plants, and they'd have the porter bulks, so they call them pigs. They'd usually have 6 of those in your plant. Mm-hmm. And so you'd have probably 5 to 6 trucks delivering concrete or cement, dust every hour. They'd be just constant, and then they'd be running out on the highway, pouring the concrete as they down. That whole highway I was involved with all the way from Superior down to Rice Lake, Wisconsin. Over time, that whole thing was, put in a 4-lane.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
So how old were you then when you left that company?
I think I was in my 20s still.
So I think you skipped a little part about yourself. You were doing all your racing during this time too, or when were you?
Yeah, that was when I started racing the street stocks, and when I was junior in high school. That was the first car I ever had. I brought a stock car home. I got my driver's license, and I got an old '63 Chevy out of the junkyard, and I brought that. It was the first car I brought home. Of course, my dad was excited about that.
About building a race car with you?
Yeah, I know. He was not very happy. Because his biggest thing was because now we're going to have clay and dirt in the yard. And of course, my dad had a cleaning business, which for many years, my mom and he cleaned the Raider Clinic, which in turn, as we ended up taking that business over. So that was his biggest concern. All the mud from the racetrack is going to be in his yard. But then it was kind of interesting because a friend that he worked with, his name was Skip Crandall, he raced late models.
Yeah.
Well, my dad worked with him. Well, he ended up making a deal with Skip. So actually, he actually welded the roll cage in the car for me. So my dad was instrumental in getting the roll cage built.
So even though he wasn't a fan, he still played an important part in getting it put together.
Absolutely.
That's always, I know we've talked about it a lot, but I've still had that bucket list to get out on a track, and whether it's 5 laps, 10 laps, I don't know if I would need to race, but just get out there, put it to the floor and see what it's all about.
I'll tell you what, that's the most fun I've ever had in my life as far as doing that.
I feel like anyone that's in racing dirt track specifically, the adrenaline they get from every lap, every time they have a chance to win or they win, it just keeps fueling it. Like once they're in it, they can't get out. And you kind of had that little case of that yourself.
Yeah. Right? And then of course, Denise and I got married in 1976, and we had Trisha, our first child, and Jason, our son, a couple of years later. But once we had the baby, we couldn't
make decisions on what
we got a house.
Well, and that's building a family. You got to make decisions on what's your priority. And I'm sure Denise was like, you want to go race dirt track, which is a lot of time. You're working on that car every night and you're hauling it to the track and you're racing and then you're getting ready for the next one, or you're going to help take care of the family, and you can assume which decision won there.
Yeah. Well, we had to take care of the family, but we had a nice little exception because motorcycles were a lot cheaper. So
you found that adrenaline rush.
We got a dirt bike, and then the Proctor Speedway actually had, when we were just watching before I started racing, every once in a while they'd have a motorcycle race at intermission. Well, I get a hold of those guys and push that. So we started that back up again. So we raced a couple times. We raced at intermission just for an extra show. So we just started pushing it and getting a bunch of dirt bikes in. So we got set up with Superior and Ashland. We raced up in Hibbing. Hibbing and Ashland were my favorite tracks. That was before. Now they've got them all circled with concrete walls all the way around.
Yeah.
But in Hibbing, because of the way the fairgrounds was set up and where their track was, I mean, you could hold it wide open and you'd fly off the back straightaway, and then you'd come back over the back and you'd fly up onto the turn corner in 3, and then
you're still in the race.
Coming down the front straightaway where you'd go right under the flagman stand. And then there was a couple of dudes, I can't remember his name right now, but we had a wheelie contest too. And up in Hibbing, we did it after the races.
Yeah.
The first time we were up there, we probably had about 60. We just advertised it out and, was, hey, if you got a dirt bike, come and race. And we had at least 60 guys, but there was one guy that could do a wheelie, and he started off with a turn 4. He wheelied all the way down, and he went all the way over 1 and 2 and went off the end in the swamp. Then he turned around and came back. And he did it again, but he stood on his seat and he went all the way. And I'll tell you what, then after the races were over, they always opened up so the crowd came down. Well, we were still out on the track yet, not racing. We were kind of mingling around. The crowd they were all over us.
You guys are building a following.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming to see the Evel Knievel's almost.
Exactly. Oh, that was some fun racing. That was some really fun.
So are you into the phase of life where you're doing sales, raising kids, and racing dirt bike? Is that kind of the next segment?
It was just starting to move. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was a terminal manager, then moved into a regional manager. Then I guess one time where my buddy bought a stock car, it was street stock at the time, And he was out of town. He said, you go race it. You can race it for me. I said, okay, perfect. So,
I'm not turning that down.
No, so I had that set up. So that was a Sunday night. Well, it just so happened on Sunday afternoon, we had a motorcycle race in Superior. So I went and raced my motorcycle in Superior, hauled that home, jumped in, brought the stock car to Proctor, raced the car at night. That was probably one of the better race days I ever had.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's fun. It's great.
So who decided that terminal manager, like, you know enough about the business, enough about trucking, it's time to go find some business? Like, when was that nudge?
Well, kind of interesting when Pete, the guy's name, was going to retire, and he just was kind of hanging around, and the salesman for the company, he was down in the Twin Cities headquarters, and he came up and he said, you know what, I'm going to start taking you around to meet the customers that we're dealing with. And so that was on a Thursday. We got back Friday late, and he had his name on the door of his office, and he was supposed to retire, right? And he was just kind of hanging. So I took his name off the door and set it on the desk. On Monday, he took his stuff. He was gone Monday.
The guy's wanting to retire. You kind of helped him get it done.
Yeah, actually, no. Jim Earl's the guy's name that I was working with. He's since passed recently. He was a great guy. He was my real mentor as far as going out and just getting to see the people and say hello and just listen to them. You know, see what their concerns are. Now, that's the main thing. You've got to be able to listen to what people have to say. It's really hard not to. Somebody says something, you got something you want to add right away, but if you listen, he's going to tell you what you're probably going to ask him anyway.
Well, what their pain point is, right?
Exactly.
I think, and that's what I'm really excited to learn about, is a lot of your fundamentals in sales, because everyone that knows you knows you're a hard worker, right? It's not, it just stumbled into this or that. And I think anyone in sales maybe knows that it's not one-to-one. You don't make one call and you get one customer. You don't make one call and you get one load. It's more like you make 100 calls to get one customer, or to get somebody to answer the phone. And I know from experience, even as you've been here, you've been in certain cities, states, not in local Minnesota, and you can't even get into the customer to visit them. Like, there's so many roadblocks in being in sales. How do you navigate that? Like, where did you build all that continuation, never give up attitude, persistence? I'm going to get into this, and not do it in a way that's, you're not trying to get into a customer and being in a manner that's not, proper. You do everything the right way and you get it done. How do you go through all that?
Well, you just got to stay with it, and hopefully that you can breaking in through the door. And that sounds a little harsh, but to get in the door is probably the toughest part, right now. Mm-hmm. It's a lot challenging at this time, back like it was in 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. But, you just have to stay persistent, because let's say if somebody, I always went for the fact that, if somebody says no, don't call me anymore, that's your answer. Yeah. But a lot of times it's just a matter of fact, we're not ready right now, maybe down in the future. So just get it.
Here's your time. Here's your opportunity. Reach out in the spring or the fall.
Yeah. And then don't forget about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the industry has changed a lot back from when you were talking previously to your early days to now. And there's so many different facets. Like you said, there's bids that are managed by third parties. So even the core shipper is not managing that bid. And there's a certain window, and then that window is invite only. So even though they may have said this is the time, you still have to be invited in to even get an opportunity for that business. And then now you see all these customers that have such high expectations, and rightfully so, right? They want their freight delivered clean, bill of lading, on time, as it should, but it's measured to the shipment level. And those days are very crucial for success in the next round of bidding, because sales doesn't just start with that first phone call. When they do accept it, you're managing an account, right? And you're building relationships. And I think that's really the foundation of this podcast, even, is keeping it very personal. And that's been your mission, right? Like, you've gotten to know everyone very well, whether it was even on the driver's side internally here, operations side internally here, or that customer in their plants. Put a lot of work in just to get. Something. But once you establish that, I know, since I retired, several of the customers that I've worked with over the years, I'll get a text, how you doing? Yeah.
What are you up to? Stuff like that. And so I stay in touch with quite a few of them.
It's deeper than just the load. It's the person, relationship driven. I believe that this, even with all of the things I had mentioned just a few moments ago about third parties in this industry is still very driven on who you know, what you know, and how you made them feel, right? Like you go in and bulldoze somebody, or like you said, you don't give them a chance and listen to their pain points. Instead, you're trying to make recommendations, or this is what you need, not what do you think you need. They can easily say, don't let that guy back here again, or,
right.
Right.
Well, and it goes, you can go back up a little bit, even, when you're courting your wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
You went through, we all go through that, and you're beeline, your focus. Like for Denise and I have been blessed with my wife Denise and our kids that, as we, some of the earlier podcasts, it takes a lot of time, and you want to put a lot of time in it if you want to be successful. So I always had the philosophy is, hey, if the phone rings, I don't care what time it is, you answer it. Yeah. That's very, very important. And that's where we got a lot of
opportunities.
Opportunities that way.
That's probably been instilled in you from when you were in the operations side of it, especially like you said, it was late at night when you get the price calls. It wasn't a 7 to 3, 8 to 4 type gig. No. It was this called, and that is definitely part of our business motto is when they call, we haul, right? Like, and that doesn't mean it's a 7 to 5 when somebody's sitting in the chair. It's whenever it happens.
Exactly. Well, even I remember when we first started talking about maybe coming on board, and I'm at the end of my career, so I've been blessed that you guys gave me the chance.
Yeah,
you're getting old, right? It's like, but when I had set up the appointment for Derek to meet with him,
yep.
And I think both of you guys, he's meet me here at 6, and then I think I got the phone call from Derek saying, hey, we're in the truck, we're on the way back because you guys are on a rescue mission to go up. I think it was when the trestle was on fire up north. I don't know if you
up in Cook area.
Yeah,
it was
something with the railroad needed trucks right away, and then in the process, they had made a cancellation until the next day. But you guys are off in the truck, and that got me excited to know that you guys just boom, you just take care of it.
Well, so I have to ask, how did you make it through all of your career without being forced into you need to get in the truck and go drive?
I just said, no way. I'm not going to do it.
I mean, in the discipline, and I talked about that, and I think there's a million books written about this and staying focused, right? Like having the one thing be your focus. Sometimes it's a distraction when you have that opportunity because you're like, well, I've literally been on the phone, customers like, this needs to happen now, and you're, when I was in Duluth, I'd look out in the yard and say, there's no trucks here, or there's no drivers, but there's a truck here. I'm not going to say no. Yes, I'll do it. Hang up, get in the truck. And they literally I just talked to you on the phone. Well, this has got to get done. This is so it's a blessing and a curse sometimes because you can't stay focused. And in your point, you were disciplined enough to say, this is where I'm going to excel. I have a family that I'm building out and I want to do it. This is my path. It's interesting that because somebody in an operations level, sales, fuel in the truck, you were moving the trucks. I know. So you knew how to drive them. You weren't able to say I've never driven a truck or sat in one. It's interesting that you didn't have to get.
I just didn't want to go over, didn't do that over the road. Like you said, I knew that I'll call all of a sudden, oh wait, Curt can do it. Yeah. He can go drive. Well, and it takes you away from
serving the spot you're supposed to be in. Yeah, it's like I said, it's been a blessing and curse. And fortunately for us, it's how we learned as much as we did, having that license. So I wouldn't change it for a thing, but I think back to some of the times when it's building fundamentals and scaling, you can't do it all, and training people and finding the right people is where your growth happens faster than just, I'll do it.
Well, one of the things too that's helped me over the years is, and the reading is, when I start to read, I get tired. But John Maxwell's got so many great leadership books, and there's just tons of different sales oriented, material out there.
Yeah, and you've given me books.
Yeah, I had a library of them. And they're I try to get 15 minutes a day was a goal, and I try to do that every day.
Do you still do that?
I haven't. No, especially since after I retired, supposedly. So
you're living that retired life. There's no rules.
Yeah, But no, it's been some great information. And one thing, a lot of salespeople don't. Do they actually ask for the sale? That was a big. Did you say, hey, I would like, can we haul this load for you?
Yeah.
May we haul this load?
Don't beat around the bush. Kind of get around to the point sometimes. And
a lot of people don't ask for that particular thing. They just go through their process and don't say yes.
Is there a favorite John Maxwell book you have, if you remember it now, or is there a favorite book, most influential book that you kind of always go back to?
I'll have to think about that a little bit. Les Giblin was he's the author. I would have to Google that to remember, I guess.
I'd be interested to hear off the air what your favorite book is. There's a book that I think it reminds me of you, and it's written by David Goggins. And for anyone that hasn't read a book about David Goggins, he's a Navy SEAL. And he had a rough go at becoming a Navy SEAL. It took him 3 tries to actually become a Navy SEAL. And through that, he had broken legs. He had all kinds of issues that happened while he couldn't finish the previous ones. But he's got a mindset that's like a never give up attitude. And he writes in a different format and he speaks what comes to his mind. It's not like, it's not written it's not polished. It's the best way to say it. So I'm going to have to bring that book for you to read, because I think you'd get a kick out of it, how you might see yourself kind of in that.
That would be good. I would like to read that. That would be interesting.
So all of this builds you up. We get you on board. We're super excited about it. You've put your time in here, and then you decide, hey, it's time to retire. I want to retire. And you retire for a short little stint. You just had the itch to get back in trucking. Is it something you always think about? Because like I said earlier, now you're part-time, you're not full-time. So you're not trying to come right back and put that heavy lift on. But was there kind of an itch to the camaraderie, getting to talk with people that maybe you missed specifically about trucking?
I'll be honest with you. I really missed working with everybody here.
Yeah.
You, Derek, Dakota, everybody here.
Yeah, I can say it's transformed our relationship very similar to family, right? Like there's no punches held. We do not talk about trucking, ironically, a lot. It's more about like family than focused on like, what is this sale and what is that? And that's something I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's been great all around, and right out of the gate, going back to when it started, I remember you guys telling me, you go find something to do and we'll take care of it. Well, all right, kind of little hesitation, thinking, all right, I'm going to go out and put myself on the line, but you did.
Yeah.
And I guess, one of the coolest ones was where trying to get into a company right, and it was in November, bad time of year for them as far as busy. And the lady had given me a call, and she says, we've got something we need picked up in the Twin Cities area. We need to get it to Superior today, if possible, or do you have any running around? Well, yeah. I called Derek right away, and we had a truck sitting there just, a mile or two away. And he said, yeah, we can go get it. We'll get it ready. So I called her back and said, hey, we got this truck. We can pick it up in a little while. Well, I received a phone call from her, after everything was taken care of. And she said, how did you do that? She said, I think the driver pulled into our yard before you hung up the phone with me. Well, that's service. That's how you sell. Exactly. Well, that was it. I mean, that was the big deal. That got us into the door. Now we can, for more. And that ended up growing and growing and growing, and it'd be an incredible account. Well, and that's the whole sales thing for Derek and I was new. You were our first salesman. So we didn't have like a playbook on here's how you get freight. Here's the way we had done it was just what we thought was best. Right. And prior to you coming on board and actually focusing on sales, ours was very similar to that kind of concept. Somebody call in, take the phone. Yes, we'll do it. We knew we had to serve and show up, right? You can't just book it and not be there. But you were our first salesman. That's kind of how, and maybe nowadays somebody hears sales, just go find something to do. It's kind of similar, but it's not, right? There's a structure. There's systems now that help you manage your callbacks, so you're not forgetting to call somebody when that time of year comes around, all of that. But we hadn't had any experience like that. It was very much like we were nervous. That concept of taking on a salesman wasn't like just a small
little piece to bite off. And I remember my Uncle Mark, he had never met you. This wasn't anything about you, but he's like, are you sure we're ready for a salesman? Like, that's a big deal. And because everything was so operation minded, it was like, dispatch truck, do this, dispatch truck, do this. But it wasn't like, who's doing all the work to secure the freight in the future? And as we started to grow, it wasn't hard to realize, like, we can't do this the same format we have. We have to have somebody building those relationships, cultivating and finding new avenues. And so, yeah, when I remember Derek and I having a few conversations, it was kind of nerve wracking, just like, because I think we met a couple times before we actually became coworkers. And those conversations were just like, and Derek is sometimes Derek has a very good way to be like, just get it done, quit worrying about all this. And sometimes I can try to get in my own head and worry. And it was like, he's like, we can't grow if we don't have a salesman. He's like, think about it. Like, literally, as we're sitting, I'm like, all right, let's do it. And then you come on board. And like you said, some of those sales meshed very well. We were there to support a salesman. And I had spoke with somebody prior. It's kind of another little segue, but I spoke to somebody prior to hiring a salesman. And they said, I'm going to give you the simplest way to make sure you keep a salesman. And I was like, okay, what? You got to support him. And that means if he makes an honest mistake because maybe he doesn't know the company or something happens, you have to support him. You can't just let it blow up on him and say, nope, we're not hauling that, Curt. Give it back to him. You know what I mean? And I can count on my hand probably the number of times where it's been, and maybe I can't think of anything off the top of my head exactly when, but we never try to say no. Like, if you said this is going to happen, we put a price on it, we come through with it. And that's been our discipline the whole time. If somebody said it's going to happen, and like I said, whether it was me, Derek out trucking, and Derek's kind of set the tone several times. See, I've seen that guy put more miles on a weekend because this is what needed to happen, and I said I was going to do it, than many guys. So it was just, like I said, it was a big time for our company to bring a salesman in to learn from you, really, because you were the expert in that field. We weren't. Well,
no about expert, but it's just being out with people and, you treat people the way you want to be treated. You ask them questions, and especially when you're able to sit down like we're talking right now, it's a lot easier, than over the phone. I think you get face to face.
Oh, there's so much value in getting to know somebody.
When then when the COVID thing came on, that changed everything. And there's some good benefit as far as with being able to do the computer. Teams meetings, stuff like that. I mean, I see that as some really good savings on certain things, as far as travel and that. But it's still, to me, there's just nothing better than sitting right across the table and visiting.
Yeah,
you'll get an answer. You'll get questions. Some of the things that people share with you that they wouldn't necessarily share, especially in a Teams meeting when there's several people. Yeah. Or even over a phone call.
Well, every customer, and I think the same for trucking companies, the concept is very similar in nature for trucking even, right? A to B. This is freight, whether it's liquid form or it's a machine or it's in a van. It's A to B kind of concept. So it's similar in nature, but every trucking company is so different and so different in the way they operate and their lanes and their networks. Customers are the same way. The customer might manufacture a similar product to their neighbor down the road, but they have a whole different philosophy on how they do their business, how they manage it, their production, their schedules. So getting that face-to-face time to build that relationship, it's invaluable. Like if you're a salesman right now, or you're entering this industry and you're like, it's a grind, right? Like you said, there's no easy day, but you need to build relationships, be persistent. Anything else that helps that you can think of that is like the foundation of a good salesman?
Well, I guess following through. And it's very important, If
I'm going to call you back, I'll call you back.
Call that, especially that first load, did everything go right? There's there need for any improvements on our end or something we can do. And you get right down to it, just because we delivered the load, it's not over yet.
Yeah.
It's not over yet until we receive the check because the billing process has to be done right.
Yeah.
And, so there's many, many steps. As we work through things to get it
from
done.
Initializing credit, right? Yeah, it's a life cycle, like we like to say. It's a full life cycle. And A to B doesn't mean it's done. There's things that happen prior and there's things that happen after. And that's all before it's considered successful. Yeah. It's a big job. And I think we're very blessed to not only have had you guiding our sales team, but then Jason, we were fortunate to have Jason come on board and and I know Jason's not here, so we don't know accounting like he does, but Jason, your son, works in our accounting team.
Yeah, that was great. I know that I can remember the day you and I were running around, we were on sales calls together, and you made me a comment, well, I think we're going to have to add an accountant to the ship here. And I said, well, heck, my son's got an accounting degree.
Yeah.
And then, so you said, well, send him over. And that worked out good. And then when he was here meeting with you, and I remember coming by, you said, hey, come on in. I said, what are you talking about? You were talking about going to work. I said, that's his deal. I'm not going to mess that up. You guys figure that out. And it's worked out good. But I guess he's my kid because he works. He's a hard
worker. Yeah.
He puts in the time a lot, and he likes it though. He loves it.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, once again, Derek and I have learned through so many things of probably the list is of what not to do. That's the easy, because we didn't know, like I said, everything we've done for the most part here has been organic. And when we've hired right people, such as yourself, so many other people that specialize in what they do, it's helped us grow or see where we need to head. But man, there's been some interesting days when I remember talking with Derek, like, how do we even do this? Where do we start? Like, do you have to start here or do you start here, and who? And then when you do that, we don't know. It's just been a crazy journey. And really, I think when you started was right when it was taken off.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
We were building our new office that we're sitting in now, right when you started. Like, everything was just kicking off. Like, Derek and we had our talks in the truck, right? I'm riding with them. That's when we really came up with any idea we wanted to do. It's like daytime is work. Our dream time was we get in the truck and we go, and that's when we do our dreaming of like, what can we do? Can you think we can do that? Do we need to get this trailer? If we get this type of truck, can we? Because that's just where we were, and that's what we went through. And those were the times right before you started and right when you were starting.
Well, another thing too, getting started, and when Derek said, well, we're going to have you because you were at that time leasing the drop yard or the pipe yard and the office here. He said, well, I'll have you work in that office. But he said, well, I got to get it cleaned out. Of course, my wife and I, mostly Denise, we had our cleaning business. So, we worked all our life. 36 years, we would have a regular job. She would clean some houses, and she was a stay at home most of the time, but she when the kids went to school, took cleaning jobs, different people she knew and clean the houses. Anyways, so we had that going, and then we took over which was the Raider Clinic at the local, the clinic in Cloquet for cleaning at night. So every night we had to do that after work. Well, so my sister was also working on that. And I said, well, I told Derek, well, my sister would probably help out, to clean out. I'll call her. And so I went over there too and helped a little bit cleaning. And that first night, and we accidentally, some paperwork that it ended up getting thrown in the dumpster. And Derek called me one day. He said, hey, did you remember seeing some papers? And I said, I think so. Let me go. I remember come over and look. And I was over in the evening. I think it was a Sunday night. And Dave White was here. And I jumped in the dumpster. I said, there's the stuff. I jumped in the dumpster. And David called Derek and says, Derek, there's somebody in the dumpster? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's our new sales guy.
Doesn't matter where that lead is, you're going to get it.
Right. So, that was kind of just interesting.
I remember that. They've teased you for a while now. And I was definitely impressed, though. I remember because, getting to know each other, you start out and it's always cordial, and it took a little bit. And then I'd be like, well, where are you going? What are you doing right now? And you're like, I got to go clean. I'm like, it was every day pretty much, wasn't it?
And Monday through Friday, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. You're like, the day isn't done till, and so so you worked your normal day, and sales is all the time, right? Early morning till after work. And then what time did you get done cleaning?
Probably 8:00. We'd get up there, and as the kids were growing up, when Jason was in hockey, Tricia was in sports for a little while, but she kind of walked away from that stuff. But with hockey, we'd have hockey games when he was younger, in bantams and peewees. Well, we'd run up. We'd have a game in Proctor. It was mostly local. We didn't have that far, but we'd run up and clean stuff for an hour, run to his hockey game, bring him home, then we'd go up and finish. So some nights we were up there till 10, 11 o'clock, finishing that off as we went along. And then once the sports thing was over, then we we just tried to beeline it up to get in and get that done. But it would vary. Then you'd have different things that needed to be done up there as far as go up on weekends. So, special projects that you did.
So you lived the definition of a hard day's work. Like there's no easy day, no day to skip, especially when you own your own business. Like you said, you did that plus a full day's work.
Right. And we'd have some people that Denise had, some of her friends that would help.
Yeah, kind of got some additional relief points. Right. Well, you had to, because I know you do some fishing trips that are annual. Right. Some fishing trips that I've yet to be able to partake in, but I'm definitely jealous. Well, I think and if many people don't know, why don't you tell us what the boundary waters are and where you go fishing and a little bit about like the no motors thing and all that.
Well, we go up twice a year to the boundary water canoe area.
So where is that?
It's up on north of Ely, which
is the border of Canada, right?
Yeah,
like for anyone that's not in Minnesota, it's literally the border. Actually, boundary waters is part of Canada.
Yeah, right? It'll cross over there. Yeah, but we stay right in Minnesota, so the Arrowhead. But we usually go into Ely, so probably another 15, 20 miles north of Ely.
And that's all hiking, carrying your canoe.
Yeah, we used to paddle the whole thing when we go, and actually we enter in Moose Lake. And once you there's a certain point where the designated wilderness is. From that point on, it's all paddling. So there's one portage. So as we got older and save time, you'd pay the resort and they'll give you a ride because it's a 25 horse motor limit. But there's a John boats, and they put the canoes your gear in, boom, they give you a ride over there. And then you set it up we go Thursday and we come out Sunday, have a time designated to meet. But then we just go out there and set up a base camp and have a good time. Most of the time.
Well, I mean, you're playing it off a little bit. It's remote. Like no airplanes can't fly below, I think it's 4,000 feet. Right. It's like a protected area. So there's no airplanes that are you're not getting buzzed by little airplanes and this and that. It's very quiet. Your phones do not work. You're off the grid. You're staying in the tent in the woods. There's no like structure. Right.
Right.
You're cooking your food right on the shore, or catch what you eat. Right. Shore lunch kind of concept. Yeah. I have yet to do it. It's one of the things I told you. And one of these times when the kids get a little older, I intend to come up there and just to decompress, because you literally have no choice.
What's really cool, and you get to right just before the sun goes down, and in spring, especially when the loons are out, and you call try to make a loon call. I got a buddy of mine that sounds just like one. Yeah. But once you get the loons going, they start talking to each other for many lakes, and it's just that echo, and it just keeps, and it's just so cool. Yeah. And then we've been up there several times when the northern lights were just flashing green and purple, and they were, they're dancing all around.
And some pictures don't do justice. It's just you got to be there to see it. You
got to be there. Pictures, nothing.
So where would anyone listening get a hold of you so you can set them up on a trip to go fishing?
Where would Well, you can. There's a lot of resorts in Ely out there.
I'm telling you, you guys send a lot of pictures when you get back, and it looks like a good time.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time. Just you get to relax. That's the good part. Except when the wind's blowing like crazy, then you got a little bit of effort. But we've been up there so many years. And my first trip up there was in 1973. Yeah, and so we've gone almost every year since. We had a little span there that we didn't go when they had the big blowdown. Mm-hmm. So that made things difficult. So we skipped about 7 years of going up there. But then my nephew he served in Iraq. When he came back, then we started doing it two times a year after that.
It's a good tradition. Yeah. So usually I ask the drivers when I have them as a guest, what's their favorite, trip or travel. For you, it's a little bit different because you're not in a truck, but what's your favorite state that you've had to travel to for a sales?
Well, I guess they're all actually pretty cool. I guess the trips up in Upper Michigan are always great because it's like Minnesota. You going out. The trips out east that you and I went to
we had fun.
We had a couple of good ones. And when you had me driving through New York City, I'd never been through there. That's a place that I don't care to ever go back to.
That was my first time in Manhattan as well. And I had told Curt, we were up in the New England area. And then I said, let's drop down through New York City. I've never been in Manhattan and you hadn't. And man, we had cops blowing their whistle at us because we're over there. Holy, this is a huge building, sitting that for me was just fascinating. But whistles blowing, they're waving you, and you're like, the light's red. I'm supposed to go or no? And
you're saying, hey, there's Madison Square Garden. Well, yeah, like I can look. People are jumping in front of you in the car, and they want you to get moving. It was cool, though. It really was.
It was intense, but it was cool. Like to just to experience it.
Well, I don't, then you take that experience and then you think about. You really got to take your hat off to the drivers that drive out there.
That's whenever somebody's going to that area. First of all, I try to connect them with somebody that's familiar with it, but then I have that deep sense of like, you have to be honest with yourself. This is going to be interesting, right? Like make sure you understand where you're going. You talk to whoever, because just from our experience in a car, and I'll twist it up. I mean, we literally are in a van, actually. We're in a little van, and me and you ended up missing our turn, and we're waiting to get on this tunnel. And yeah, quite funny.
Yeah. Well, another challenging, of course, Chicago was always a challenge. The first time that I had made a trip down in there, you're going off a GPS. Well, you get downtown, you got too many buildings. That doesn't work. And now you're going in circles.
Always be prepared. Do your homework before you get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know I'm excited, and I know Derek is, and the whole company is going to benefit from having you back as in the sales arena right now. So we're super grateful for that. And I thank you for taking the time to sit with me and maybe before you decide to fully retire again, which Denise probably will say you'll never do because you just can't kick this trucking bug, but we'll have to have you on here again and maybe hear how this part-time quote unquote is going for you.
That sounds good.
Thank you for taking the time to tuning in to Keep Trucking Personal. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like and share. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future topics. Feel free to reach out to us at podcast@kivibros.com. Until next time, happy trucking.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kivi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together, diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.